All right, hello everybody and welcome. Thank you once again for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about 10 things that you should know about Oscars, or the Oscar fish. If you've been keeping fish for at least about 5 minutes, you probably already heard about and seen Oscars. They are everywhere and pretty much everyone loves them. So let's do it. Here are 10 things that you should know about Oscar fish. Let's face it, many new fish keepers do not have a ton of patience. We live in an instant gratification kind of world. Oscars are awesome for these kind of people because they grow so fast, they grow so big, and they make a huge statement in your aquarium. It doesn't happen instantly, but under the right conditions, these fish are like weeds. You can expect your Oscars to grow 8 to 10 inches the first year, and they can reach sizes up to 12 to 14 inches once they're fully grown. Some people argue and say that they can get even bigger, but you need to understand that this is under very good conditions, meaning they have to have the right size tank, good clean water, and a good diet. We'll talk about all of this as we go along with the list. If you know nothing about aquariums and you just started doing research 5 minutes ago on how to keep one, you've probably already heard of Oscar fish. Well, you're watching this video, so. Anyway, Oscars are extremely popular and they are everywhere, and there's a million reasons why. The point is, Oscars are one of the staple fish in the aquarium hobby. If you talk to 10 fish keepers, you'll probably hear from all 10 of them that they've kept Oscars at one time or another. A lot of fish keepers, including me, the Oscars were one of the first fish they ever got when they got into this hobby. The fact that they grow so fast, they're so personable, and they've got those big bulging eyes staring back at you, it's no wonder so many people fall in love with them. But the problem with them being so popular is that I believe it makes them one of the most mistreated fish in the hobby. Before you go out and buy your Oscar, do plenty of research on how to care for these monsters. Do the right thing, take care of them, and they will take care of you. They really are the fish that is, in my opinion, the closest thing that you'll find to a dog or a cat in this hobby. You just have to live with one and you'll understand what I mean. They really do become like a member of the family. When you think about a fish in an aquarium, you don't really think about them having personalities, but I can assure you that they do, especially Oscars. They have the most personality of any fish I've ever had. When you've had them for a while, it's like they recognize you as soon as you walk in the room. They get so excited, just like a cat or a dog would. It's so sweet. You haven't experienced the bliss of fish keeping until you've walked into a room and your Oscar starts wagging his tail. It's next level stuff. They're also very moody. You can tell when they're sad, you can tell when they're happy. These fish have a lot of drama to them. Now, let's be realistic. They recognize you as the big blurry thing that gives them food a couple of times a day. But it's still cool. Get an Oscar, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. As fish keepers, we look at our aquariums as a place to not only house our pets, but to also express ourselves and beautifully decorate these aquariums with things like plants and rocks and driftwood. This is awesome, but understand that your Oscars are going to express themselves too. They're going to show you very quickly that this is their tank, not yours. Oscars are downright destructive to almost any decorations you put in your tank. You can spend hours finding that perfect place for the skull with the bubbles coming out of it, or a nice plant, and then you walk away from the plant and you come back and you find that they're floating at the top of the tank, because again, Oscars are going to determine where these things go, not you. I recommend that if you're going to keep your Oscar in a 75-gallon tank, let's keep decor to a minimum. Maybe do something like a 3D background with one focal point of driftwood or something like that. But understand that in a smaller tank like that, the more decor you put in there, the more space you're taking away from that fish to swim around. And if you're going to keep them in a 125 with plenty of room in it, maybe just stick to a couple of larger pieces of decor that are heavy, that the fish can't throw around. There are several different types of Oscars out there. They all pretty much look the same, except their color and the pattern of their color will be different, except for the long fin variety. The most common is the tiger Oscar, and they're primarily a grayish black with red or orange blotches all over their body. Then you have the albino tiger, which is basically the same, except instead of the grayish black color, you'll have white and red. Then there's the red and Lutinos, which have a more consistent reddish color to their body, and their head and fins will be that grayish black. The Lutinos are basically the albino version of the red. And then there's the lemon Oscar. That's almost entirely yellow. It's magnificent if you ever get to see one. When it comes to selecting tank mates for your Oscars, there's one thing that you need to keep in mind, and that is if it can fit in the Oscar's mouth, it's gonna get eaten. Most of the time when you find Oscars in the pet store, they're only gonna be a couple inches, and you're gonna think, well, they're gonna be fine with my smaller fish. Big mistake. Oscars grow at an incredibly fast pace, and most likely it's gonna be at a faster pace than the other fish that are in your tank. They're gonna look around at the other smaller fish and they're gonna say, someday. And eventually that someday comes and they grow larger than the other fish in the tank, and guess what happens? The other fish become Oscar food. Don't buy into this idea that if fish grow up together with other fish, they're never going to be mean to each other. I understand that there are some cases where that might be true, but most of the time it's not. Trust me. I usually recommend that you keep Oscars as the focal point of your tank, but if you absolutely must have some friends in there with them, stick to other South and Central American cichlids. Red devils, jaguars, blood parrots, arowanas, they all do fine. We never really have a problem with Oscars being aggressive toward the other fish in the tank. Fortunately, it's the other way around. I call Oscars gentle giants, but I don't usually like to admit that because people will probably give me crap for it. But just remember, if it can fit in the Oscar's mouth, it's going to become food. If you decide on a tank mate for your Oscars and they are very small and they end up getting eaten, doesn't mean your Oscar is mean, it means you are. Oscars sometimes have a misunderstood diet requirement, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what they do need and what you shouldn't feed your Oscar. It's important to have a varied diet for your Oscar. The most important part is to have some type of quality floating food, whether it be cichlid pellets or some kind of cichlid sticks. One thing you need to understand about Oscars is that they are not piscivores. Piscivores is a fish that feeds on other fishes primarily. It's be a fish that gets most of its nutrients from hunting other fish. While Oscars are opportunistic feeders, they will feed on other fish at times. They are not piscivores, so their diet does not consist of a lot of fish in the wild. They eat a lot of crustaceans, they eat a lot of insects, they eat invertebrates, and they will also sometimes eat some vegetation, falling seeds, things like that. My experience is that Oscars don't eat vegetation in captivity because they do have access to quality cichlid pellets and shrimp and things like that, so they really don't eat vegetation matter that they might have to eat in the wild because there isn't anything else available to them. So with that varied diet, along with the cichlid pellet or the cichlid stick, I would recommend feeding your Oscars some type of shrimp, whether it be a frozen shrimp or a freeze-dried shrimp. While Oscars are not piscivores, it is okay to feed them a small amount of fish. You can get them some fresh shrimp or fresh scallops, whether they're fresh from the grocery store or if you buy them frozen and thaw them out and give it to them, that's fine. But that should not be their primary source of food. I typically don't like feeding my Oscars live food when it comes to other fish because it can cause injuries injuries to your fish from chasing other fish. You can also get a disease transmitted from the feeder fish to your Oscar, and that's also highly common. So best to use freshly prepared food that you're either making yourself or store-bought and processed. So your Oscar does eat a varied diet of insects and shrimp, crustaceans, some type of quality pellet food. It is okay to cut up a little fresh seafood from time to time. and to avoid those land-based proteins like beef and lamb and things like that. The general theme of this video is that Oscars get really big very fast. So when it comes to setting up a tank from them, I don't even want you to think about a tank smaller than a 75 gallon. But remember, bigger is always better. If you buy one of these fish as a baby and it's this big and you want to put it in a smaller tank until it starts to get bigger, that's fine. I totally understand that. But just remember, these fish can grow up to 8 to 10 inches in just the first year. The perfect situation for an Oscar fish is going to be a 125 gallon tank. Trust me on this one. When you put them in there, you see how happy that fish is, and that fish responds to you with those big bug eyes. Trust me, you're going to want to do everything you can to provide the best environment possible for that fish. Oscars are an extremely hardy fish, capable of handling a wide range of water parameters. But don't let that allow you to become lazy. You've still got to do your job. I've had Oscars in a pH of 6 all the way up to an 8, so pretty much whatever you have coming out of the tap is going to be fine. Just remember, consistency is the key. Rather than chasing a pH all over the place, just keep it the way it is and keep it stable. They'll be fine. You'll want to set your temperature to 78 to 80 to keep them nice and warm and cozy. But I've known them to do fine in water a little bit colder or a little bit warmer than that. One of the things with Oscars is keeping the water clean. These fish are big eaters and big poopers, so you definitely got to be on your game. Just stay on top of your maintenance and they will be your best friend forever. Like any other fish in the hobby, Oscars are vulnerable to diseases if you're not doing your job. Keeping the water too cold, introducing new fish that haven't been quarantined, and not keeping up with maintenance are all things that can increase the likelihood of coming down like ick or parasites. But there's another one you'll hear about every time you talk about Oscars, and that's hole in the head. This is something that I've dealt with before, and it's pretty common in Oscars. Fortunately, it can be treated with success. Bottom line, if you do your job, you shouldn't run into any of these problems. Keep up with your maintenance. Be very cautious of where you buy your tank mates from, and provide a quality, varied diet, not feeder fish. And you shouldn't have any of these problems. If you do, there's tons of information out there on how to treat them. I don't have enough time in this video to go over all of them, so I'm just going to try to keep these videos as brief as possible and just go over the basics. If you want to learn more about common diseases in Oscars, you can Google it and find out a ton of great information, and YouTube. Okay, I've talked about a bunch of stuff that hopefully helps you to make a decision of whether or not to keep these fish. I've talked about them being fun and easy to keep, but does that make them a good beginner fish? Yes and no. They're a good beginner fish because they'll usually be able to pull through a lot of the mistakes that new fish keepers will make. But unfortunately, most new fish keepers break the #1 rule when it comes to Oscars, and that's tank size. Most new fish keepers aren't going to set up a 75 or 125 gallon tank. They're almost always going to start with a 20 or a 29 gallon tank, and it could be a while before they upgrade to something larger. This means that the new fish keeper sets up a 20 gallon tank, then they put an Oscar in there, and it ends up being in there for years. I know I'm a broken record here, but don't fall for this crap that the fish is only going to grow to the size of the tank. I don't know who came up with that. Putting an Oscar in a 20 gallon tank would be the same as putting a Rottweiler in a crate the size of a Chihuahua. It's just not right. If you're not prepared to upgrade to a larger tank within a few months, just don't even bother going with an Oscar. Remember, 8 to 10 inches in their first year. 20 gallon is only 24 inches long. This goes back to me talking about Oscars being the most mistreated fish in the hobby. Almost all the cases of Oscars being mistreated is because they're in a tank too small for them. So they are good for beginners, but only for beginners that know they're going to be in this for the long haul, and that they're going to be able to do what they need to do for the Oscar. I hope you've learned a little something. about Oscars in this video. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments and I'll be glad to help you out. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you can be alerted of when I post something new. Thank you so much.